So as mentioned, we will be starting with the exploration of the backend, so the ASP.NET Core project in the first section of this module. Let's take a look at the completed solution architecture of ASP.NET 0. As mentioned, we are working here with the ASP.NET Core API backend and the Angular frontend combination. So the backend consists out of several Visual Studio projects built with ASP.NET Core. Of course, this is the server-side code that will be exposing an API towards the client. Typically, when building a regular ASP.NET Core API, you would create a controller that is exposing an endpoint. While that is definitely the normal way of doing it, ASP.NET 0 is using something called application services, which will be exposed. We'll talk later how this is done, but in essence, these services will be exposing an endpoint for the client to connect with. On the client side, we have an Angular solution. We can host this under the ASP.NET Core application as a client app or deploy it separately. It's in fact nothing more than plain JavaScript and CSS. It's indeed a SPA, a single-page application. We will explore the Angular project in much detail later in this module. For now, just remember that this part is relying on the typical ways an Angular application is built, so based out of components. We have the account module used mainly for authentication-related functionality. This will communicate with the backend to authenticate the user. Once logged in, the user will be redirected to the app module. From now on, all communication with the backend will happen by including a token in the header so that validation of the token can take place on the backend. In ASP.NET 0, as we'll see in the upcoming demo, there are quite a few projects that you'll get out of the box, and it can be a bit daunting initially to know what does what. When you take a look at the available solution files, so SLN files, you'll see amongst others an all solution that contains, as said, quite a few projects. Not taking into account the name of the generated project, you'll see quite a number of projects which have been generated, as you can see here. And I'm even leaving out the Xamarin related projects. Those are the Android and iOS projects. Let's take a look at the generated projects. The application project is an important one to start with. It will typically contain those application services, so the backend logic. We will be writing code in there to expose functionality to the client. That is, in fact, a .NET Core class library. The application client project is similar and exposes functionality to the client. Under Application Shared, we can find, as the name implies, abstractions for these services, so interfaces as well as DTOs that will be used for the communication with the client. In the application that we will be building, we'll write most of the code in these projects. Next, we have the core and the core shared projects. The core project will typically contain entities and domain services, so more the domain layer functionality. And under core shared, we can find constants, enums, and other helpers. Next, we can see the Entity Framework core project. As you may have been expecting, this project will contain all code that has to do with the EF Core implementation. EF Core, short for Entity Framework Core, is the .NET Core implementation of Entity Framework, which was available in other .NET, so non-.NET Core implementations. So we'll find in here typically the repository implementations, DB contexts, and the like. Next, and this is definitely an important one, we also have several web projects. Web.mvc, as the name implies, contains a regular MVC application, including controllers, views, and more. It's not really relevant for the implementation we are working with in this tutorial. However, web.host is important for the implementation that we're working with here. That's the big one. This is going to be hosting the API that our client side will be communicating with. Web.core contains some shared code used by the MVC and the host project. And web.public contains, well, a separate public website. We won't be exploring that one any further in this course. The migrator project is used for database migrations with EF Core. Finally, there's also several test projects containing the unit and integration tests for the application. Since we are looking here at the server side, the web projects are really relevant here. Since it can be a bit confusing starting out with ASP.NET 0 which application does what, let me extract here the web projects. The MVC project is a regular MVC application, so it will contain controllers, views, and will typically be used in combination with jQuery. We won't be exploring that project any further in this tutorial. The public website won't be explored either. That's a separate MVC site that can be used as a landing page for the application. But as mentioned, the one that we are using in this course is the web host project, which is hosting an API for use from the Angular client-side code. In itself, it won't have any UI code in there really. Let's explore this project in a bit more detail now. The web host project in our solution is an ASP.NET Core project. As mentioned, its sole purpose in life is exposing the server-side functionality over an API. If you are familiar with building APIs with ASP.NET Core, you'll probably have built these using a controller. A controller, let's say an API controller, will expose functionality for the clients. Typically, this will result in a lot of controllers. And most of the time, these controllers don't do an awful lot. They will work with a service class and return the result of that call typically. That is why ASP.NET 0 will expose services directly as controllers. We'll see this being used when we build the application. It also falls back on a default routing schema for this, which is of course important for the way the clients will connect with these endpoints in the web host project.